So last class we talked about how to factor by finding the greatest common factor and then dividing to find the other factor. Today we're going to talk about a method called factor by grouping. We use factor by grouping when we have something like this. We see here that the directions say factor. And it's a little bit different because we have four terms, 1, 2, 3, 4. So the method we're using today is when we're factoring with four terms. So if you see 1, 2, 3, 4 terms in your problem and you're asked to factor, you might want to try this strategy first. So in a problem like this, when there are four terms, the first thing we want to do is when we cut the problem in half. So we want two terms on one side and two terms on the other side. The next thing we do is we look for the GCF of the first two terms. So the greatest common factor for 2x squared So we know 2x squared is 1 times 2 and x times x, and 10x. So we see that the greatest common factor is 2x. Then we do what we were doing in class the other day and divide everything by 2x. When we do that, we're left with x and plus 5. We know that this is going to cancel out. X times x is going to cancel out. And then 10 divided by 2 is 5. X divided by x is 1. Then on the other side, we have a negative x, or we have an x and a 5. Well, the only way we can make x is with x, and the only way we can make 1 is 1 times 5, so it looks like the GCF is going to be 1. And remember, if the front number is negative, our GCF is actually going to be negative 1. So we divide everything by negative 1. We're left with x plus 5. Now this looks familiar from last class too, because notice we have x plus 5 here and an x plus 5 here. That is a GCF. When you divide those, you're left with a 2x and a minus 1. So our answer is x plus 5 and 2x minus 1. In the next problem, same idea. We have four terms. We cut them in half. The first thing we do is we look for the GCF for x squared, x times x, and 8x. It looks like the only thing that they have in common is x, so that's going to be our GCF. Then we divide everything by x, and we're left with x plus 8. On the other side, we have 2x and 16. So the only thing they have in common are 1 and 2, but the biggest one is 2, so our GCF is going to be 2. We divide everything by 2, and we're left with x plus 8. So notice these are the same. When they're the same, we can take that out, and we're left with an x and a plus 2. Same thing, we have four terms. We cut it in half. The first thing I do is I look for the GCF. So x squared is x times x, and 5x is going to be 1 times 5 and x. Looks like an x is the greatest common factor. We divide by x, and we're left with x minus 5. On the other side, we have 3x and 15. The greatest common factor is 3. So we divide everything by 3, and we're left with x minus 5. So we have x minus 5 here and an x minus 5 here. So when we divide, we're left with x plus 3. We have four terms. We cut it in half. Then we look for the GCF. So it looks like in terms of numbers, they both have a 3 and they both have an x. That's the most they have in common. We divide by 3x and we're left with x plus 4. On the other side, we have 1 times 2 and x. 1 times 8, 2 times 4. So the greatest common factor is 2, but remember, since this is negative, we're going to make the greatest common factor a negative 2. So we divide by negative 2, and we're left with x plus 4. Since x plus 4 is the same, this is what they have in common, we can divide by x plus 4, and we're left with 3x minus 2. Your assignment tonight is the same types of problems. You'll probably need a piece of paper to complete it, and please turn it into Google Classroom when you're done.